Welcome to the SSPX podcast and our next installment of our interview series. This past winter, we spoke with Father Marko Tilosanec, a Croatian priest who has a fascinating story. He was ordained a priest in the standard diocesan structure in his home country of Croatia. Even before his ordination, though, he began to seek out more information about Catholic tradition. After his ordination, he experienced what could mildly be called difficulties while attempting to follow his conscience in learning and celebrating the Latin Mass. This prompted him to visit the Society of St. Pius X's seminary in Zaitzkofen, Germany, and eventually to become a priest within the structure of the SSPX. So, this interview is the story of one priest's journey to tradition. But beyond that, it's also the story of one priest attempting to bring tradition back to an entire country that was left behind, first by the communists, then by the Modernists. This is the story of Father Marko Tilosanec.
Welcome to the SSPX podcast, and we are doing a special interview today with Father Marko Tilosanec. Did I say that right?
Yes. That's
very
correct.
Good. I got the first part right at least. Hello, Father. How are you?
Hello, doing well. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. We were speaking to you today about the mission of the Society of St. Pius X in Croatia, and also your story, how you came to be a society priest. I'd also love to learn a little bit more about the Catholic Church in Croatia. As an American who's self-centered and knows only things about America, I know next to nothing about Croatia. So I would love to learn more about it. So could we start, Father, with a little bit about you? You entered a diocesan seminary. I read a little bit about the account of your journey to tradition and to the Society of St. Pius X, and we're going to link to all of that so our viewers can read it. But in your own words, could you give us a little bit of that background, that story?
Yes, I entered the seminary in 2007. At that time, there was no traditional Mass at all in Croatia, at least no official Latin Mass. And I didn't know really anything about the Latin Mass. The only two things which I knew were that the Mass was said in Latin before the new Mass came, and the priest was facing the people with his back. So I didn't really have any information about the traditional Mass, and the first step which directed me in a way towards tradition was the apologetics research. I came in contact with a group of lay people who were doing a project, an apologetics web page, and I started a research reading church documents and the useful apologetic materials in order to better know the Catholic faith and to learn about the arguments, how to defend it. And this was very important for me in order to have a real notion of all the Catholic teaching, and little by little, as I was doing my studies in the seminary, of course, I realized that some things which are taught in the modern seminaries are not really in conformity with the traditional Catholic doctrine. In my research, I came in contact to a faithful who was pretty good informed about the traditional movement, about the Second Vatican Council and the differences between the new Mass and the old Mass. And he gave me a book, Iota Unum, written by the well-known Swiss philosopher Romano Amerio, and it was an eye-opener, so to say, for me, because until that I thought that, of course, there are problems in the church, but I was thinking that it was merely on the individual level, yes, moral problems in the lives of the laity and even the priests. But at that time, I realized that the problem is much deeper. The thing which is especially struck me was when I read that the whole bishops' conferences stood up against the encyclical letter of Pope Paul VI, Humane Vitae. For example, the bishops' conferences of Germany, France, Canada, they rebelled against the church teachings, and it was really a shocking fact for me. And so I realized there is something wrong on the systematical level in the church. It's not merely a question of individual errors, but that the problem is much deeper. And I continued my research. I found out more interesting and helpful materials about the tradition, about the differences between the old and the new Mass, and the problems of the Second Vatican Council. I came up to different pamphlets and texts from Michael Davis, for example, where I realized that the differences between the old and the new rite are very serious, and that it's not merely a question of superficial differences, but that practically the whole rite of Mass was pretty much changed with the reforms which were made after the Second Vatican Council. And yes, I found some other materials on the websites of the Society of St. Pius X, and some other helpful traditional Catholic materials. And I continued to study and came to realize that the differences between the whole traditional structure of the Church, so it's doctrine, theology, morals, spirituality, discipline, are pretty much different in comparison to the reforms which were made after the Second Vatican Council. And in this way, I realized that I have to do something about my vocation, so that things are not as I expected when I entered the seminary. And I thought that yes, so there are some problems within the church, but one has simply to do what he can in order to strive towards perfection. I realized that the problems are much deeper, and that the tradition of the Church in its doctrine, theology, and spirituality, morals, discipline is the way one should follow. It is the real expression of the Catholic faith.
So you were studying about tradition. You were learning all of this while you were in the seminary. Why is it that you think you were able to discover this path of tradition? Were the rest of the seminarians, were they also traditionally minded, or not really?
No, I didn't find much interest for any real deep theological discussion among the seminarians. What I expected when I entered the seminaries was that I would find there much more fervor for the faith, for spirituality, for deeper spiritual life and discipline. But my experience was that I was a bit disappointed with the state of things which I found in the seminary, and there was not much interest really for any serious theological discussions. Yes, there were some colleagues in the seminary who wanted to find out more, yes, and with whom I could have some.
So there was not a lot of other seminarians who you were able to have these types of discussions with. It was all based on, this is the new theology we are following. This is what it is. There was no thinking outside the box or looking at the traditions of the past. It was all just, let's just keep moving forward.
Yes, I didn't find much fervor among my colleagues in the seminary, and everything was, the whole atmosphere was pretty much superficial in matters of interest for theology, spirituality, the discipline in the seminary, and I couldn't really find much space for theological discussions, although there were some colleagues with whom I could speak about the matter, and a few of them even visited the traditional Latin Mass, which was celebrated at that time in the diocese. But yes, there was one colleague on my in my class who got really interested for tradition and who even learned to say the Old Mass. But in the end, he didn't continue along this path, but pretty much, yes, all the seminarians, all the colleagues in my seminary didn't have any real interest for any deeper theological discussion, much less for the matters of tradition, for the differences between the old and the new rite, and the problems of the Second Vatican Council. I didn't find any ground for such conversations among my colleagues. And the whole atmosphere was pretty much superficial, I can say.
So you were ordained a priest in the diocesan seminary, all while you are doing this research and this study. And what happened afterwards? Did you start to work in a parish under the diocese like a normal priest and all of that?
Yes, during my research, at first I didn't manage to grasp the whole extent of the problem, of the crisis in the church, and all the critical questions. Of the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and the problems of the new Mass. At first, I recognized that the tradition is something good which should be followed, something that has great value and what should be appreciated. But I followed pretty much the, let's say, neoconservative or the indulged Ecclesia Dei line of thought. I appreciated the work of the society and of the Archbishop, but I just wasn't convinced that the whole approach of the society was correct. And I thought, as these groups too, that the Archbishop and the society went a bit too far in its reactions on the crisis of the church. And so I was more attached to this approach for the solution of the crisis. And I got in contact with the Fraternity of St. Peter as a seminarian. I went to visit one of their priories, and I tried to find a solution to my vocation. How could I realize my attachment towards tradition? And what I found there wasn't really satisfying for me. It wasn't a practical solution. They couldn't offer me anything which would be reasonable and which would be acceptable and should be a real solution for the situation, that I could work as a traditional priest, as a priestess who could say the old mass and preach the traditional Catholic doctrine in my country. And I was, yes, a bit disappointed with this experience, and only later I realized that there is a doctrinal problem in this approach. And so it is a question of the documents of the Second Vatican Council. I think the main issue are the documents in itself acceptable, like the Ecclesia Dei communities say that there is no general problem in the text, there is no error, there are no things which could be in itself, which couldn't be reconciled with tradition. And is it only a matter of interpretation, or is there a real doctrinal problem of some statements of the Council which couldn't really be brought in harmony with tradition? And as I continued my studies, I realized that the approach of the Archbishop and that his arguments are really correct and that they give a solution to the crisis. I came to read a book of Archbishop. They have uncrowned him, and that was a second eye-opener for me, I could say, when I realized that the Archbishop had a real solution and had the correct attitude towards for the problems for which are prevailing in today's church. And there are really things in the documents which aren't reconcilable with tradition. Is the question of religious liberty. What especially struck me in this study was that was the approach of the post-conciliar popes and their implementation of the teaching of religious liberty, when Vatican itself required of Catholic countries to take out of their constitutions the article which expressed the Catholic identity of the countries. For example, yes, the Catholic countries like Italy, Spain, Colombia, some cantons in Switzerland. And it is a proof in that in reality it isn't possible to interpret these novel doctrines in light of the tradition, because the popes are the ones who interpret these doctrines and not the individuals. And yes, that happened as I was a deacon. And at that time I made my decision to visit one of the houses of the society. I visited our seminary in Zaitzkofen in Germany, and what I found there was really impressive for me. I found tradition in its purity, in its entirety. I was thinking to myself, as I was having a formation in my diocesan seminary, what should one change in the seminary in order to make it more traditional, more in conformity with how all the seminaries were operating before the council? And when I came there, I realized that's it. So that's the ideal seminary which I had in my mind. And yes, all the aspects of the life in the community were very impressive and made a real impact on me. And that was my first contact with the society in practice. And after that, I had to find a way to fulfill my decision. So I saw that this commitment for tradition is the real solution for a priest who wants to live the Catholic faith in its doctrinal purity. But I had to make my way out of the diocesan structures, and yes, I was trying to discern the right moment when I could fulfill this decision, put it into practice, and yes, the priestly ordination in my diocese came, and yes, I became a priest in my diocese, and I was trying to see how to go further, and I was assigned a parish vicar in one of the parishes in my diocese, and the atmosphere in this parish was very modern, and in a way I tried to see at which moment God wanted for me to act in this direction, to come to the society, to follow the tradition. And it went pretty fast. I refused to do some things in the parish, the most obvious modernist reforms which are a real burden for a Catholic conscience, like communion in hand. I refused to take part in it, and the bishop let me know that I have to make my decision either to leave the diocese, I couldn't stay anymore at this place with this attitude, and to find myself a new community, and that was the one-way ticket for the Society of St. Pius X, and I realized yes, could stay only 2 months in the parish where I was assigned to, and I went to the seminary in Zaitzkofen to talk with Father Schmidberger, who was rector at that time, and yes, so I joined the community of the society, and at first I was required to do certain formation in the seminary, to take part in the theological studies, to have lectures in the seminary, and to learn the liturgy. Yes, I could already celebrate the Latin Mass, but yes, so I stayed in the seminary for about 2.5 years, and there I was received in the society. I made my first assignments in 2014, sorry, and after finishing my formation, I was assigned to the Austrian district where the Croatia belongs to, and I started our official apostolate in my country 5 years ago.
Wow. I'm reading. I've been reading over the last couple of days, and I'm skimming through it now. The story on the website, which we'll link here below in the comments here on YouTube and on our podcast feed. And there are a lot of details here, and I would recommend to our listeners and our viewers to read it. What strikes me, though, Father, about this part of the story is, I don't want to say the hatred, but I can't think of another word. The frustration, the adamant attitude of the bishop and the priest from right after when you were ordained, when you wanted to do a Latin Mass in your local parish, and it set off. It says here in it's Google Translate, but it says it set off an alarm in the diocese. And I think it was the bishop who said, "Oh yes, it must be Tilosanec who's doing it." They knew about you. They knew that you were that weird traditional guy, that weird traditional priest. But it was follow our line or get out. Was that how it felt to you, Father?
Yes, that's true. Bishops today have a lot of tolerance and understanding for all sorts of moral problems, which they encounter among the priests. But in this case, when someone wants to follow tradition, they aren't tolerant at all. And the bishop didn't have any interest at all to try to persuade me to stay in the diocese, to offer me something more conservative assignment. Actually, yes, there was a parish with a pretty conservative priest at that time, and it's a big parish which has a parish vicar, and my colleagues were telling to me at that time, "Oh, that's for sure, you will be assigned there." But no, the bishop decided the opposite. He sent me to a very Modernist parish where the parish priest was very intolerant, and he made no exceptions for me, and he required to do everything as he prescribed. Yes, even to little details.
Have you had any contact with your colleagues in the seminary or anyone in the diocese? Has anyone reached out to you, or have you talked with them? Have you thought maybe that they would want to join you, or are you just kind of seen as the rebel?
We have contacts with some priests who have sympathies for tradition and who support our work, but they don't want to step out. They don't want to give open support for our work. They just keep very discreet and that they wouldn't be found out. They support tradition, but it's a general problem amongst priests who want to be attached to tradition, but on the other hand experience some personal problems, the questions of their future, how would they adapt to the community, and the issue of their of the support for their existence. Mm-hmm. And so I think that mostly in most cases it is a question of some personal motives or doubts which arise among the priests and which keep them away and which hinder them to fulfill this decision.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, but first, can we talk about Croatia and Catholicism in general? From what I have learned over the last few days, which is not much, it seems that Croatia has a very rich Catholic history. One place I saw said 90% of the population is Catholic. Is it a devout country? Is there a great practice of the faith there, or is it more just a cultural thing?
Yes, like in most historically or nominally Catholic countries where most of the population is Catholic, at least on paper, Croatia, has some elements among its population which give account of its Catholic identity. For example, it was an interesting reaction of a group of our faithful who came from Australia a few years ago, and they saw religious sisters in their habits, and they were impressed by it because normally it's not possible to encounter such a situation in some Western countries. But yes, the general situation in the church in Croatia is more conservative than in some other Western countries. But on the other hand, yes, the practice of the faith is not that high. The average mass attendance about, let's say, 10 to 15%. So it isn't. I think it's the same situation in other countries, which are predominantly Catholic, nominally, like Italy, Spain, or Austria. Yes, Catholicism plays a certain role in our society. It has its importance, but it's mostly a matter of some superficial elements which, don't get much deeper of cultural level. Yes, but still, it has its advantages. For example, when my rector, Father Schneeberger, came at first time to Croatia, he was impressed by that one could see that there is a certain substance of faith which one can build on, and which gives some perspectives for our future work. So the situation is much more conservative than in some Western countries, but still it's getting more and more liberal with time.
Sure. There were it was a great number of priests and religious who were persecuted and even martyred. After communism fell, essentially in the 90s, did things get back to kind of a normal for the church? I guess we could say. I mean, this was after the reforms of the council as well, but there was still that Catholic spirit that was still there, at least.
Yes, the Catholic spirit was preserved, at least on a social and political level. And as Croatia, as well as other Eastern countries, suffered under communism, the reforms of the council couldn't develop, and the whole revolution couldn't just take place in a way that it did in the Western countries. So the Catholic spirit was pretty much preserved, although the reforms were implemented, and but yes, so the first and second generation of bishops and priests who followed after the council were pretty much conservative, at least on a surface, but it's not. Yes, we can take the example of Cardinal Schipper, who was very much traditional minded, and who kept the Catholic spirit in which he was formed, although he didn't grasp the problem of the situation in the church, with the reforms which followed after the council, and he interpreted the reforms on the merely superficial level as a matter of discipline and practical changes which are necessary and which have to be accepted. But yes, in this sense, this generation of bishops and priests, they didn't understand the problem of the reforms which happened in the church, but they still kept the old spirit in a way and remained conservative. But so after the 90s, the modernism came in, and the reforms which followed the councils started to develop and to be implemented more and more. And so we can say that the church here follows the same path as in the other countries.
There's a decent number, from what I understand, of Eastern churches or Eastern Rite Catholics in Croatia, and certainly you're in the area of the world where that's bordering large numbers of the Eastern Catholic or Eastern Orthodox religions. How are the relations between the Latin Church and the Eastern rites in Croatia? Is it pretty good, or has there been conflict?
There is a small percentage of Eastern Rite Catholics of the Byzantine Rite. Let's say that there are about 10 to 20,000 Eastern Catholics in Croatia. There are much more Eastern Orthodox, mostly Serbian people, so the Orthodox, which belong to the Serbian Orthodox Church, and the ecumenism has been put into practice here as well as in the rest of the church, but I think that it wasn't developed in this measure as in some other Western countries. Yes, because there are some national tensions between Croatian Catholics and the Serbian Orthodox Church, which were, like among other Orthodox churches, the national element and the particularist, their direction of these communities is very much expressed and forms their life. Yes, we could see that in the issue of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which wasn't recognized by the Russian Orthodox Church as out of nationalist interests. Yes, and there is a conflict which lasts up until today. It's a similar situation among the Serbian Orthodox Church, where the national tensions are very much expressed, and I think that it affects ecumenism in a way. Yes.
So, Father, let's turn to your mission. Are you the only priest of the Society of St. Pius X in Croatia? And do you have anyone to help you? And where do you serve? Where is your apostolate?
Yes, I am the only Croatian priest in the society. Yes, I've been active in our apostolate in Croatia since I've came to the society. And we have started our regular apostolate 5 years ago. So that's the time. That's the moment as I was assigned to Zaitzkofen, the district headquarters of our Austrian district, so which comprises out of several countries: Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, Croatia, Slovenia, and so I am officially stationed there in our district headquarters, but most of the time I spend in my country, where we have 3 chapels in our capital city, Zagreb, then Split. So Zagreb is located in the continental part of our country, our capital, and there we have a chapel which is attended by over 100 faithful every Sunday. Then the other chapel is in Split. It's on the southern coast of Croatia, about 4 hours drive away from our capital, Zagreb. And then our third chapel is in Rijeka, which is located on the northern coast of Croatia, about 2 hours away from Zagreb. Apart from that, we have also 2 chapels in Slovenia, the neighbor country, one in Ljubljana and the other in Maribor. We have a priest friend, Father Vitko Podržaj, who takes care of the apostolate in Ljubljana. He's been there for about 15 years, and so he takes care of this chapel as our priest friend, and the other chapel is in Maribor. Yes, I've been working in Croatia mostly alone until now, and so this year, next month, in September, I will get help, Polish priest, Father Sebastian Kulinski, who will help in our Croatian apostolate, and we hope that we can build a priory one day in my country. That would be our goal.
Oh, that's great.
At the moment, unfortunately, we don't have any vocations in our seminaries. We had some, but so we have to pray for these intentions that we get priests from Croatia who would, God willing, be working in our country one day.
And you said that there's about 100 people that attend Mass weekly in Zagreb. Is there a large traditional movement in Croatia, or is it pretty small and you're trying to help it to grow right now?
No, the traditional movement in Croatia has started about 10 years ago. Okay. There was no official Latin Mass until then. And at that time, the diocesan Latin Mass started in Zagreb, which is running until today. And there are some priests who celebrate privately or even publicly in a certain frame, but there are actually no other traditional initiatives, and the traditional movement is pretty young in Croatia, but it's growing. I think there is a big potential because yes, there are a lot of faithful good Catholics who just aren't informed about the tradition and who come to know tradition with time, and so I think we can expect stable growth in the future. Yes, we have experienced certain growth during this Corona crisis because, for example, in Zagreb we had about 50 faithful before the Corona crisis started last year, and now the number of the faithful has doubled up. Yes, more than 120 or 30 faithful every Sunday. Yes, the similar situation is we have in other chapels, and so we hope that the tradition will be growing in the future, and I think there is definitely a good potential in our country for the growth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just how you found tradition, I'm sure there's many others in Croatia who just don't have the information that you had, and like you said, just trying to get them that information, that story, that history of tradition, that truth. Maybe that's all they need.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, at the time as I was in the seminary, there was practically no literature in Croatian which was available about the critical issues of today's church, the differences between the two rites, the Old and the New Mass, and the problems of the Second Vatican Council. But yes, with due time, I hope that we can build up our apostolate in a way that much more faithful and priests could discover the riches of tradition.
Absolutely. Well, Father, I'm going to close by asking if anyone here in the States or anyone else who's listening around the world wants to help or is able to help. What is it that you need, and how can they help, Father?
Yes, so below the video you you can find attached the number of the bank account of our society association in Croatia, and this way, if you are willing to help our apostolate, we would appreciate every donation on your part.
Well, hopefully we can help in a little way, Father. But God bless you for the work that you're doing. I can't imagine being the only, essentially the only traditional priest in a country. That's missionary work, if I have ever heard it. So God bless you and save you for all the work that you're doing.
Yes. Likewise. Thank you for the interview and for the opportunity to talk about our apostolate in Croatia, and I recommend all our efforts to prayers of our faithful.
Absolutely. Father, it was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much.